What makes you the baddest motherfucker on the planet, Nate? I gotta ask, before the fight even happens, what makes you the guy?
Kicking ass.
Nate Diaz is easily one of the UFC's most entertaining fighters. Competing in the UFC since 2007, the Stockton fighter has had an explosive rise to superstar status during the past few years. Now, with his sights set on Jorge Masvidal for UFC 244, with the winner being given the first ever BMF belt, I'm sure we're all interested to see how this fight plays out. So for this video, we'll be taking a look at some of the most interesting and fascinating facts about Nate Diaz. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at 12 facts about Nate Diaz. Number 12. He was born and raised in Stockton, California. Nate Diaz is no stranger to hardship. Being born and raised in Stockton, California, Diaz grew up in poverty and was constantly surrounded by gang violence. Once he moved with his mother, his older brother Nick began training in mixed martial arts. This sparked a curiosity in Nate, who soon began following in his older brother's footsteps, training in MMA. Using martial arts as a positive outlet, Nate Diaz honed his skills to become one of the best MMA fighters today. Number 11. He is the younger brother of Nick Diaz. While most of you are likely familiar with the older brother of Nate Diaz, there may be a few newer fans out there who are oblivious to this fact. For those of you who don't know, Nate Diaz is the younger brother of former WEC and Strikeforce champion Nick Diaz. Although it's been quite some time since his older brother has stepped foot in the cage, Nick Diaz is a well-established fighter who competed with the likes of George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva. He was also the person who inspired Nate Diaz to begin training in MMA. So I think we owe him a big thank you for that. In total, the two have a combined 66 pro fights between them. Number 10. He won Season 5 of The Ultimate Fighter. The Ultimate Fighter is a reality TV show the UFC puts on which allows fighters to compete for a chance at a UFC contract. Nate Diaz was one of the contestants on Season 5, operating under guidance of former lightweight champion Jens Pulver. During the show, Nate Diaz defeated 3 contestants in a row, putting himself in place to fight in the season finale. And in the finale, Nate Diaz ended up defeating his opponent by TKO, in turn winning Season 5 and securing a UFC contract in the process. Number 9. He's an expert in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Much like his older brother, Nate Diaz is a specialist when it comes to Jiu-Jitsu. And while Nate is naturally good at boxing, his true passion lies with Jiu-Jitsu. Out of Nate Diaz's 20 wins inside the Octagon, a massive 11 of those have come by submission. He is a second-degree black belt who has trained under Cesar Gracie. Apart from applying it to his MMA career, Nate Diaz also runs a jiu-jitsu school with his brother in Stockton, California. According to Diaz, his inspiration for teaching the children is to push martial arts in his area and to inspire people. And from his experiences of being one of those kids back in the day, Nate Diaz realizes how vital it is for troubled kids to have a healthy outlet. And as a result, having jiu-jitsu to fall back on is something he's still thankful for. Number 8. He's a vegan. Once Nate Diaz turned 18 years old, he made the decision to adopt a plant-based diet. Although he isn't exactly strict with that diet and has admitted to occasionally eating eggs and fish, Nate typically follows a raw vegan diet when training for fights. Although, considering his occasional indulgence in certain meats and dairy products, perhaps it would be more appropriate to call him a pescatarian. According to Diaz, he states that he doesn't need meat in his life, and that he hasn't had any cravings for meat since he was 18. He also largely credits his nutrition to his success in the cage, and is an advocate for the benefits of a plant-based diet. Number 7. He's set numerous pay-per-view records. Nate's infamous call-out of Conor McGregor in 2015 set the stage for one of the biggest rivalries in the sport's history. And together, both Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor smashed multiple pay-per-view records. They did 1.3 million buys for their first fight at UFC 196. And that increased even further to 1.6 million buys in their rematch at UFC 202. And as of right now, their first fight is the 3rd biggest event in UFC history, with their rematch coming in at 2nd. So far, only one event has ever passed those pay-per-view numbers, and that was unsurprisingly the highly anticipated grudge match between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 229, which did a massive 2.4 million buys. Number 6. He was on vacation 2 weeks before beating Conor McGregor. While Nate Diaz was a well-established fighter long before Conor McGregor rose in popularity, Nate's star power exploded after his win over McGregor at UFC 196. What was more remarkable about that win is not only did he take the fight on 2 weeks' notice, but he was actually on vacation prior to accepting the fight, in turn giving him very little time to prepare. While some conflicting reports mentioned that Nate Diaz had been training for a triathlon prior to taking the fight, Diaz refuted those claims, saying he was actually on holiday in Mexico. Also interesting was the fact that Diaz said he was unable to eat for 3 days due to drinking contaminated water prior to the fight. Number 5. He likes to slap people.
So Bieber walks up right now, you say what to him?
Smack!
For anyone who's watched Nate Diaz compete, you'll know that he loves to use a particular move in his fights. Simply put, he loves to slap people. It's both Nick and Nate Diaz's trademark move, and they've gone so far as to call it the Stockton Slap, named after their hometown. He is most famous for using this move against Conor McGregor, where Diaz dished out multiple slaps onto the Irishman during their fights. And while it may not be meant to necessarily hurt his opponents, it definitely adds a sense of humiliation that a punch just won't do. Oddly enough, he even took one opportunity to give UFC President Dana White one of his signature slaps. Number 4. He's tied for most submissions in lightweight history. By now, we all know that Nate is very experienced when it comes to his ground game. He has so many submissions on his record that he's actually tied for the most submission wins in lightweight history, with his 7 submissions putting him right next to Jim Miller. Not only that, but he's actually earned 5 Submission of the Night awards for his performances. As if that wasn't enough, he also holds the record for the most Fight of the Night bonuses in the UFC, coming in at 8. So overall, some pretty impressive accomplishments. Number 3. He's been in several fights outside the Octagon. Both Nick and Nate Diaz love competing in the Octagon. Unfortunately, they both also love competing outside of it. The Diaz brothers are both well known for being willing to throw it down at any moment, which has resulted in several altercations outside of the cage. Whether that involves shoving opponents during a weigh-in, chucking bottles at Conor McGregor, or getting into a heated brawl with Khabib Nurmagomedov, the list simply goes on and on. While the behaviour is no doubt appealing for some fans, it remains highly controversial to others. Whichever way you swing it, he certainly has a knack for grabbing your attention. Number 2. He regularly competes in triathlons. While fatigue is an issue that many fighters face, Nate Diaz is one of the few who doesn't seem to have that problem. Nick and Nate Diaz are well known for having outstanding cardio, and much of that is largely due to the fact that they regularly compete as triathletes. So when he isn't preparing for a fight, Nate Diaz often spends his free time competing in grueling triathlons, a multi-sport race that usually involves a combination of swimming, cycling and running over a great distance. This type of extreme endurance training gives Nate Diaz a massive advantage when it comes to conditioning. Even among the most elite fighters in the UFC, you won't find many willing to go through the kind of training that Nate Diaz does. Number 1. He frequently uses marijuana and CBD.
I gotta smoke the weed after the fight, so I had to smoke Game Up CBD.
So what was that?
CBD by Game Up Nutrition. It's good for you.
The Diaz brothers are well known for being outspoken advocates of both marijuana and CBD. While Diaz has never actually tested positive for marijuana for a fight, he did however land himself in a bit of hot water after he brought out a vape pen containing CBD during a press conference for UFC 202. While it did violate a rule at the time, Diaz was luckily let off with just a warning. And that wasn't the last time that Diaz was seen using CBD. In fact, Nate Diaz could be seen just recently lighting up a CBD-infused joint during an open workout ahead of his fight at UFC 241. He could even be seen encouraging audience members to pass it around. But But to go back even further, he could also be seen famously lighting up a joint during a live event at UFC Fight Night 126. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.
Never have a doubt, do you like me now? Am I good enough now? Should I get more loud? Till you hear the fucking sound? Oh no, I'm losing my shit again, having to fit again. Man, I'm forgetting when I used to have some friends, I used to play pretend. We all grow up and then hating my phone and trends. I'm about to blow my head, nobody knows I'm dead. Fear I'm a ghost instead, think that I'm close, I get straight comatose in bed. Try to go slow with breath, without my nose and head. Heart doesn't go the trend, faster it goes.